CSS is changing. The introduction of logical properties reforms how we control layouts. You're probably using properties like margin top and margin bottom to add margins above and below your components. With logical properties, these change to use margin block start and margin block end. And these changes apply to all the places you've been using properties with top, bottom, left, and right. Properties such as paddings, borders, positions, and more. It also affects how you declare the height and width of a component. But why? When I found out that so much is going to change, that was my first question. And once I found that out, it all made so much more sense. Let's look at the current state by examining a paragraph tag with some text within it. Say we want to add some padding at the start of the text. We can do so by using the property padding left. And this is totally fine for languages like English, which flow from left to right. But there are also languages that flow from right to left, such as Arabic and Hebrew, which are used by millions of people. Now if we want some padding before the text in these languages, we'll have to use padding right. This makes having the same paragraph tag handle different languages complex. And we see the same thing play out in languages like traditional Japanese that flow from top to bottom. Existing styles like padding left and margin top are based on the physical properties of the component. Top, left, right, and bottom. Logical properties instead allow us to add styles based on how the content within flows. In our paragraph tag, all we need to do is use padding inline-start. This adds padding at the start of the content. For left to right languages like English, this would be on the left. And for right to left languages like Arabic, this would be on the right. This makes our components and styles reusable and scalable. Okay, now that you know the why, let's move on to the important terms that you need to know. The first is writing modes. This is a group of CSS properties that decide the flow of text and content within our components. One of them is direction, which determines if the content flows from left to right or right to left. It has two values, with the default being LTR, which stands for left to right. The second value it can have is RTL, which stands for right to left. Direction can be passed as an attribute directly on HTML tags. Dir is a global attribute, which means it can be used with all HTML elements. Another important one is writing mode, which can be used to set the flow as vertical, and is useful for languages like traditional Japanese. Writing modes have a few more properties that you could find helpful, and I recommend you take a look at that in your own time. We're going to move on to the second most important term, inline. This is the direction of the flow. For horizontal modes, this can be left to right or right to left, and for vertical modes, this is top to bottom. This is very important and goes hand in hand with our next term, block. This is the direction that is perpendicular to the direction of flow. For horizontal modes, this is top to bottom, and for vertical modes, this can be left to right or right to left. The next group of terms that you need to know are start and end. These are what replace top, left, right, and bottom. Let's take an example of English. The text flows from left to right and top to bottom, which also means that the inline is from left to right and the block is from top to bottom. For logical properties, left would be the start of the inline and right would be the end of the inline. Similarly, top would be the start of the block and bottom would be the end of the block. Now let's look at Arabic, where the text flows from right to left, but still top to bottom. For logical properties, right would now be the start of the inline and left would be its end. The block start and end would stay the same. Finally, let's look at traditional Japanese that flows from top to bottom and right to left, which means inline is from top to bottom and block is from right to left. For logical properties, top would be the start of the inline and bottom would be the end of the inline. Right would be the start of the block and left would be the end of the block. Okay, that was the hard part. The rest is a lot easier. Let's look at the changes we'll need to make to our code. And we're going to start off with margins and paddings. Rather than being declared with left, right, top, or bottom, they can be declared with inline-start, inline-end, block start, and block end. Inline-start will target the start of the inline, and inline-end will target the end of it. Block start will target the start of the block, and block end will target the end of it. The values these properties can have stay the same, so you can pass in pixel values, percentages, etc. They also have short forms. Margin inline and padding inline are the short forms for inline spacing. They take one or two values. If you pass in one value, it applies that spacing both to inline start and inline end. If you pass in two, the first one gets mapped to inline start and the second one to inline end. And margin block and padding block are the short forms for block spacing. They also take in one or two values. If you pass in one, it applies to both the block start and end. And if you pass in two, the first one gets mapped to block start and the other to block end. And that's all the changes for margins and paddings. Not scary, huh? The next change we'll need to make to our code is for width and height, which, hopefully it struck you, are physical properties. For logical properties, we want to style based on the flow of contents. Thus, instead of using width and height, we use inline-size and block size. Inline-size targets the size of the direction the content flows in. For English, which flows horizontally, this will be the same as width. But for Japanese, which flows vertically, this will be the same as height. And block size targets the size of the direction perpendicular to the flow of content. For English, this will be the same as height. But for Japanese, this would correlate to width. The values these properties accept don't change. You can still use pixel values, percentages, etc. It also supports max and min sizes using max inline size, min inline size, max block size, and min block size. Okay, margins, padding, and size are the most important changes. But some of the other properties that are changing are borders, which instead of using physical properties like border top or border bottom, you can now use logical properties like border block start or border inline end. Positioning also changes. Instead of using top, left, right, or bottom to place items, you can use inset-block start, inset-block end, inset-inline start, and inset-inline end. Scrolling changes too. Instead of using overflow X and overflow Y, you can use overflow block and overflow inline. Text align now also supports start and end values that can be used instead of left or right. That's most of the important changes, and I hope I made logical properties simple to understand. If you found this video helpful, you can help me by liking and subscribing. I am the Helpful Coder, and it's been a pleasure.